Good afternoon. Come on in and find a seat or stand. There's water in the back over here if you're thirsty. Welcome. I'm sure people are still coming in. Might be hard to find a parking place out there. Welcome. I'm Marie Dimkowski. I'm the Executive Director of the Pullman Chamber of Commerce. We are a 501c6 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to help make Pullman a better place to live, work, and do business. We promote, we support, and we advocate for our member businesses. And more importantly, I follow the 3 C's: community, collaboration, and communication. And that's what brings us here today together. The Pullman Chamber currently serves close to 400 members. The Chamber as an organization is not taking a position on the topic before us today. I hope that that's clear. At 400 members, I cannot speak for 400 members, and I know that there's a mixed bag of feelings out there, so thank you for honoring that. but we do believe that we're the right organization to have invited the Port of Whitman and AgTech OS to have this opportunity to speak to the community and answer some of your questions. Carl Weber has served on the Port Commission since 2020. He is a 30-year resident of Tico, Washington. Carl and his wife Diane make their home in Tico, and he's going to start us off today. Carl?
Thanks, Marie. So I want to start off by thanking the Pullman Chamber for helping put this together, and also SEL for allowing us access to this facility. So the Port of Whitman, real quick, there are 3 commissioners. Each one represents a district, the same districts as the county commissioners. I am the representative of District 1, which is where we are right now. We have with us today the commissioner from District 2, Christine Meyer. The District 3 Commissioner, Tom Camerzell, is away on other port business, so he isn't able to attend. I want to introduce a few other people real quick. The staff from the Port of Whitman: Kara Rebold, Brenda Stav, Sarah Heifeld, Calvin Johansson, Fletcher Ackerman. So I'm sure that most of you came here today to learn more about biodiesel and biodiesel production, but I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about the port's involvement, what our vision is, and where we are in the process. So we will start with that. So the port has been awarded access to a $5 million loan from the Community Economic Revitalization Board through what they call the Committed Partner Program. To qualify for this, we had to have a preliminary plan for public infrastructure and a committed private partner. At this point, we have reached a purchase sale agreement with the current owners of 184 acres on Highway 195 and Hawaii Road. That sale is contingent upon rezoning because a portion of that land is in the city limits of Pullman. If the rezone is successful and the purchase goes through, the port's vision is for what we are referring to as an agriculture advancement campus. Now, that's not the official name. That's more of a descriptor. What it would be a business park focused on value-added agriculture and technology commercialization. Since that information was shared about the proposal, we've actually been approached by 2 other prospective tenants. The Washington State Crop Improvement Association has expressed interest in the possibility of leasing approximately 10 acres to build a new facility at that site. And a startup company that's commercializing technology that was developed at WSU, they presented at our strategic planning session on the 13th. They found a small building in Pullman, but they will likely outgrow it very quickly.
What group is that?
We'll share that information later. So this picture shows the entire proposed land purchase, and as I mentioned, portions of it are in the city limits of Pullman, others are not. And we recognize that there are challenges and concerns with that site, but when we look at this site compared to other areas and other sites in the county, this one has more advantages than any other. The first is its proximity to Highway 195. Highway 195 allows for commercial transportation to and from that site without having to go through downtown Pullman. Highway 195 is also designated by the state of Washington as a highway of statewide significance, which means it gets a higher priority for funding for maintenance and repairs from the state. Highway 195 also has more capacity for commercial transportation than any other road in the county. It has access to I-90 in Spokane to the north, Lewiston Highway 95 south, and west via Highway 26. The site also has access to the Pullman city utilities, at being in the city limits. And mainly it's the water. The last water rights transfer of this kind in Whitman County happened 15 years ago and took 2 years to process. Also being located near WSU and the University of Idaho, that will be more conducive to the transfer of technology from the research labs to a site where it can be scaled up and commercialized. And last but not least, it's for sale. Trying to find land in the county of this size especially that can be developed for economic development and businesses is fairly difficult. So the port staff is currently working with the city of Pullman and with our engineering firm and trying to find the proper plan. The plan that was reviewed at our last commission meeting was used as a starting point. Since then, we have received information from the city, from community members, and suggestions, and are working to try and develop the best plan that we can move forward with. Once that is available, the port will share that publicly when we submit the actual application. The process for rezoning will follow the steps outlined by the city of Pullman. It will have public comment periods, and the final decision will be made by the Pullman City Council. And I just want to be clear, what happens if we are unable to rezone that land? The port would decline to purchase the property and we wouldn't access the funds. However, if the city of Pullman does approve that rezoning, the port is ready to take the next step. So I think there's an unwritten rule that if you have to do a presentation like this anywhere on the Palouse, you have to include a picture of a wheat field. Usually they're pictures at harvest time with the rolling hills, sun setting in the background, or springtime from Steptoe Butte. And those pictures are beautiful, but I chose to show you a picture of a wheat field, of one specific wheat field. This wheat field right here is the most productive wheat field in all of Whitman County, and there isn't a close second. This wheat field doesn't grow wheat anymore. It grows the economy. And if you haven't figured out where this wheat field is by now, it's right behind me. This is in the lower left-hand corner is Terra View Drive. We're somewhere in the upper right-hand corner of this picture right now. In 1985, the Port of Whitman purchased that wheat field. The commissioners at the time were Gerald Druffel, R.P. Hegler, and Edwin Andrus. Instead of tractors and combines, in 1987, bulldozers and earth movers started working the ground. And in 1988, a Pullman-based company with 21 employees signed the first lease and became the anchor tenant. If we fast forward to today, we can see that this wheat field has evolved into an economic engine for the entire region. Some of you work on this economic engine, and if you don't, you probably know someone who does. The Pullman Industrial Park now provides jobs and security for many people. These jobs allow people to live the quality of life that we enjoy in Whitman County. It helps to support their families, buy things from local stores and restaurants, and it allows them to buy houses. The tax dollars generated help pay for roads, schools, parks, hospitals, and many other things in the county. Many things have changed since 1985, and if we're going to continue to create opportunities that will allow the next generations to enjoy their life in Whitman County, more things are going to change in the future. Right now, greenhouse gas emission standards are being set that are unachievable with current technologies. And in order to achieve them, there will have to be new innovations, new business models in agriculture and other industries in the county. New energy sources will have to be explored, possibly like the one we're going to hear about shortly. New farming methods and equipment will need to be developed, and new businesses will need to be created to support those changes. Sorry, I got ahead of myself and the video didn't play. Instead of growing crops here and exporting them out of the area for processing, we need to take a look at how we can use the crops grown here to produce products locally. The products might be fuel from oil seeds, they might be food from grains and legumes, and they might be products that haven't been thought of yet, made out of crops that aren't even grown here yet. One thing that is for sure about the future is that things are going to change. We can either look at these changes as challenges or we can look at them as opportunities. If we're going to help create opportunities for our children, grandchildren, and their children, it might be time to consider the possibility of a new economic engine for the region. So what did it take for the Pullman Industrial Park to become the economic engine that it is today? It started with a group of people looking at a wheat field. The local government agencies and people of the community and the business leaders had serious conversations and made some difficult decisions. Infrastructure was built, roads, power, water, technologies were developed and commercialized. It took people with great ideas willing to take risks and build businesses. Production areas, offices, conference rooms, and boardrooms were built. So what will it take to bring a new economic engine into existence in the future? Buildings with production areas, conference rooms, offices, and boardrooms will have to be built. That's going to require that people with great ideas are willing to take risks and start businesses. Some of these people might be in this room now. They might be in our universities, our high schools, grade schools. Some of them might not even be born yet. Technologies that are currently being developed at WSU and the University of Idaho, and some technologies that haven't even been dreamt of yet, are going to have to be commercialized. Infrastructure is going to have to be built. Our local government agencies, our business leaders, and our communities are going to have to work together, have some serious conversations, and make some difficult decisions. So, where do we begin? I think we should begin with a group of people like you looking at a picture of a wheat field. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl, for the information and the history and background. I'd like to introduce our panel moderator for today. Paul Kimmel is the Palouse Area Regional Manager of Avista Corporation. He also serves as a board member to the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, Pullman Moscow Airport Board, as well as many others. And with that, Paul, get us started.
Thank you, Marie, for that introduction, and thank you all for coming. This is great. Before we begin, I want to call out Jeff Elliott of Schweitzer, who is behind all of this technology. And I don't know if you saw it, I think it was the Trib or the Daily News last weekend, where they featured Jeff and the work he does here at Schweitzer. So could we recognize him, please? He's made me look good a few times, just saying. So it's my honor and privilege to be here today. I had the opportunity to sit in a meeting with AgTech in the port when Governor Inslee was here, so I was able to get a little more insight into the project as well as all of the moving pieces and parts with this. So thank you for that opportunity. So joining me here is from my right and on down, Ernest Beiser. Ernest is CEO of AgTech OS. Next to him, not next to him, but Richard Parnas is next to him, Chief Engineer with AgTech OS. Next to him, Carrie Jansen, a farmer from the Palouse area. I think you're up closer to the Lamont area somewhere, or? Tico. Okay, thank you, yes. And then Brian Kraft, who is the Chief Technology Officer with AgTech OS. So with that, Ernest, I think you're going to provide a little bit of information, and then I'll come back up and we'll ask some questions.
So before we get started, I really want to thank everybody for coming out. We've been trying to engage the community for several months now, and as we got this started, we communicated with the farmers first and foremost, and I want to thank the Druffels, the Maters, and the Jansens for all of their support in helping us facilitate the idea as far as the feedstock, how we're going to be bringing it in, and how we efficiently and economically provide it into products locally here in the Palouse. We're going to go through a little presentation with you where we're going to talk about the problems we're addressing. We're going to show you our solutions, our products, how we're clean and green, and really be open and upcoming with you guys. And then we're going to go into the questions and answers.
So this really started by looking at value-added agriculture. And as we did that, we started thinking about rotation crops. When we started this, we were actually looking at hemp as a rotation crop. But as we went out and talked to farmers, learned a lot more about what they're willing and not willing to do, became pretty clear to us that canola was something that we could focus on that is viable in this community, that could be used as a rotation crop, and we could get value-added products from.
So another problem that's being identified, especially for farmers and heavy operations, is fuel supply shortages. Diesel goes up and down, and having to import it in, especially as a fossil-based product, we're able to mitigate that by producing biodiesel on site and work with the farmers in order to fuel their vehicles. And then commodity price instability. This is kind of the crux of what makes biofuels fail. They all are based off of commodity price that fluctuate. And if a company is out there that's barely able to, get in the green or get into the black, then we're able to, really get around that by working locally with the farmers and then going through those logistics problems.
Hi, everybody. This is a schematic of what we plan to do. So we start with the farms, and we get canola grain from the farms, and we go through a seed crusher that would be set up on the site that we're proposing. And we'll crush the seed, and the seed will produce oil, canola oil, which is a wonderful, wonderful feedstock to make biodiesel. It's really easy to make biodiesel from canola oil. And we'll go ahead and we'll make the canola oil. And what happens, though, in the biodiesel industry is that a byproduct of making biodiesel is a chemical called glycerin. And you can sell glycerin to Procter & Gamble and Unilever for $1 a gallon. It'll end up in your shampoo and your soaps and things like that. But what we can also do is ferment the glycerin into what's called a platform chemical called 1,3-propane-diol. And I'll explain more about 1,3-propane-diol in a minute. Sounds like a complicated thing, but it's used in 100 different products that are made out there, okay? And we'll make it with a bio base instead of a fossil fuel base. Now, you go through this, and what else is left? After you crush the seed, you have the other 60% of the seed, which is the seed meal, which now we can talk about using for animal feed. So again, we're closing another loop here in the local economy. As Ernest referenced or referred to it a minute ago, we get the grain from the farmers, but again, we make biodiesel fuel, which they can use in their diesel equipment, with greatly reduced greenhouse gas emissions, reduced other emissions. It's a very clean fuel. Just to throw a number out to you, the U.S. Department of Energy consolidated the results from hundreds of different studies to indicate that biodiesel has about a 74 or 75% lower carbon footprint than diesel produced from fossil petroleum. Okay, so that's a very large improvement. Okay, anyway, what we're all about here is closing loops. So let's go forward and talk about another loop. After we make our 1,3-propane-diol, we sell it. We sell the seed meal into the animal feed industry. Now, what else do we do here? Box number 6 there is labeled green methanol. Well, when we make biodiesel, we use methanol. okay? Anybody here know what methanol is? It's the alcohol you should not drink, okay? It's the alcohol you should not drink, but we use it in making biodiesel. Well, when we use that, that has a carbon footprint. So that's our long-range plan, is to close that loop and also produce methanol on site to feed into our biodiesel. And we'll get more into that if there's questions about it. We'll see the questions that have been submitted to the port. Now, I mentioned a minute ago that biodiesel has a much lower carbon footprint than fossil diesel. So this slide here shows the wells-to-wheel fossil energy use of 6 different fuel types. And you can see that here, gasoline, diesel, biodiesel, renewable diesel, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is like golf, lowest score wins, okay? And you can see biodiesel there with various attributes of it is basically the lowest that there is. Biodiesel in many markets actually has a lower carbon footprint than, for example, electrically powered cars, because it depends on how you generate the electricity, okay? 1,3-propane diol, that product I talked about a minute ago that we'll make from the glycerin, I said it's a platform chemical. Impact-resistant plastics like the glasses that I'm wearing use 1,3-propane diol. And there's a lot of other applications of it. For example, in making carpet fiber. For example, this carpet here may have a polymer in it called PTT that uses 1,3-propane diol. The vast majority of 1,3-propane diol comes from overseas. It would be nice to have a local source of it. Finally, let's go back to the methanol. Okay, this little diagram here shows us how we're going to close this really important loop. Every other biodiesel plant in the world and most other industrial production systems in the world bring stuff in to use to make your process. So we would bring in methanol, located in the bottom green box, make our biodiesel. And after we make our biodiesel, well, we're also going to be using energy to make the biodiesel, and that energy is going to come from a combination of solar energy and biomass boilers, okay, some of the biomass. But those boilers are going to make emissions. Now, using best available technology, we can clean up all the particulate emissions and the NOx emissions, the SOx emissions, but there's still the greenhouse gas emissions like CO2. Well, right now, at the university I come from, at the University of Connecticut, and right here at WSU, there's very active research here and all over the world on how to convert CO2 to methanol. So we're going to close that loop given by the arrow on the lower right, going from emissions to biomethanol. And that's our long-term plan, okay? So what we're going to end up doing here, is close these loops so that we can make this, what we're proposing here, the cleanest industrial facility on the planet. That's what our aim is. We're aiming for net zero, okay? That's what we want to try to do. And we need your help to do it.
So the whole biorefinery concept is really what we're aiming for, where we're using all of our products and feeding those into each other, into other systems to create a portfolio of products that lead to a profitable company. We're going to be putting a big solar install into this, and that's part of our play. These are solar concentrators from a company up in Canada. We're going to use these to concentrate sunlight to create steam heat that we're going to use in our processes. So not only are we trying to close the loop of the chemical processes that are going on, we're also trying to do it using solar energy.
So, as you've heard, we're really trying to be an intersection between sustainable technology, agriculture, and making a transition into the fossil fuel dependencies. And one of the things that we haven't really discussed is we're using a lot of sustainable technology as far as solar and biomass, but we're also using software technology. We're working with NVIDIA to actually produce a carbon credit matrix, as well as an artificial intelligence engine that gives us predictability when these things are going to fail, whether it's our machines, whether it's the crops, whether it's the solar, all of the above. We have a $600 billion company that we're working with in order to mitigate a lot of those factors. So on that sustainable aspect, we're able to predict faults and failures, and we're able to plan around with the farmers. So how it works. This is the software model that we're using. The farmers come in, they sign up, they give us their acreage, they tell us, how much they're going to bring in, then it gets put in for quality assurance testing. Our AI models will then determine exactly how much pollution is being averted, how much carbon is being averted based off of their machines and our other products, the 1,3-propane-diol, as well as the solar energy. All of it kind of comes together to create a carbon credit complex. And we're going to be working with the DOE in order to establish some of these numbers. The benefits, it's obvious. We're providing sustainable agriculture, economics, and ecological impact. Working with the farmers, and we're able to give a long-term price that's correlated with our product price. We're not going to be stuck in the swings of canola being worth 30 cents one week and 15 cents the next week. The farmers are going to be working with us in long-term contracts, and we're going to be able to offer the ability for them to keep producing planned and not be shut off from max capacity. The accurate models and simulations, that's our work with NVIDIA. Using these models and simulations, we're going to be able to improve on our own processes as well as other industries at the same time. And of course, we're maximizing our environmental impact and reducing our carbon footprint. So that's our presentation, and we really appreciate you guys going through it with us. And now we're going to address some of the questions that we've been getting through the port and from you guys through several mediums.
Good. Thank you, Ernest. Thank you all for that presentation. And again, you see the QR code, you can pose questions through that. I'm not assuring you that your question will get answered today, but certainly it will get answered. I think their intent is to be as transparent as possible. Brian?
So when you scan the QR code, it's going to take you to our FAQ page. You scroll down, sign up for the newsletter,
Okay.
and you can respond with questions to that.
Great. Thank you. So, password for SEL guests.
SEL quality, all caps. Yeah,
SEL quality, all caps.
it's outside the door too if they need.
Oh, it is. Okay, it's outside the door. Good. So again, I'm going to lead the panelists through a series of questions. And again, it's about why this, why here, why now, and why you, okay? And I'll direct these questions at one or more of you. So first off, explain to us a little more about the relationship between the port and AgTech OS. And Brian, maybe you can take this.
So this is really a landlord-tenant relationship. The port owns the land. We will be going into a long-term lease with them to develop out the campus.
Thanks. So how is WSU involved in this, Brian? And I know there's questions about that.
So WSU is not involved in this. I'm CTO of AgTech OS, and that's what I'm here as. I do have a role at WSU, but WSU is not involved in this project.
Okay, thank you. Washington State has some pretty strict environmental laws and regulations. Again, you saw the presentation. Do you foresee any difficulty meeting any of these in order to acquire your permits?
I just based on the processes we plan on running and what we're looking at doing, we do not expect significant problems. This is going to be a pretty clean operation. We do know that we're going to be subject to multiple layers of looks at the city, the county, and the state level, and we're ready for that.
And I'd like to add, we've been really working alongside, a lot of organizations looking at our products, emissions, all of the above, and there are a lot of tax incentives just because we'll be replacing a lot of fossil-based products with organic-based.
Thank you. Yeah. So again, a little bit about why this. Tell us about the idea of setting up a canola-based biodiesel plant, how that started. Maybe Brian or Ernest?
You want to start it?
Well, I've been working in biofuels research and creating a bridge with artificial intelligence simulation for several years now. And I've been looking at several crop producers, and I was honestly very interested in hemp for years. And then as we started gaining traction and talking to the farmers, we found out that canola is there. And that's, canola is the best production for biodiesel.
And I'm sort of a bioenergy, biomass specialist. That's part of my historical role. And I met Ernest a couple of years ago, and we started talking about this. And as we got into canola and started looking at the different things we could do, and the number of loops we could close was really attractive from my perspective, just because this whole concept that we're running is a biorefinery, and it's a bunch of closed loops. And this is kind of the holy grail of biomass.
Thank you.
The last thing to add on that is I've been making biodiesel since 2007, and canola is like the dream feedstock, okay? It makes a wonderful product. It's really clean. The process of using canola seed to make biodiesel is very, very clean. My company back east is actually finishing a biodiesel plant right now located on a wastewater treatment site, taking a waste product from a wastewater treatment plant. This is a pretty low-grade material, not really fit for polite conversation, but we're making it into biodiesel, okay? Canola's easy.
Thanks. Carrie, I want to ask a grower a question here. Why is canola a desirable crop for farmers here in Whitman County, and what are some of the challenges raising this, and is there potentially enough feedstock out there to supply an operation like this?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say I asked here, I guess, to represent agriculture and farmer. We have deep roots in the farm. I'm fourth generation. Just quick background, I was asked to promote, I guess, or explain. We have deep roots. We farm northern Whitman County. I'm fourth generation. My sons are farming with me, fifth generation. We now have sixth generation on the ground. We farm with, my daughter is also involved. We've grown canola since '85, off and on. Quickly, to answer your question as best I can, the first canola showed up in the area here, Pullman area, towards Farmington, up north. Basically, wasn't quite as profitable then, but it was because of an invasive grassy weed, Italian ryegrass. With a different chemistry with canola, those farmers here are able to combat that with different chemistry. That weed, that grassy weed, has become resistant through the years from class 2 herbicides and et cetera. Our situation up northern Palouse, we do not have that yet. We grow it for entirely different. It's equitable everywhere. We grow canola, I call it nature's antibiotic. We have a disease pathogen in the soil than wheat growers have. We're on a 2-year rotation, our farm, where we grow pulses and wheat. And we have Cephalosporium and Fusarium, 2 diseases that can really whack us in the wheat crop. Canola is a really bio-friendly crop that basically fumigates that soil to increase our yields. Secondly, challenges with canola, it's just kind of become a win-win. Hence, you're seeing more of these yellow, bright fields around. I noticed in your slides earlier on the open, you saw canola fields out there. A limiting factor for canola right now is our canola. We farm, grow, store, and deliver our canola to a crusher in Warden, Washington, and that is limiting acres because of their crushing capacity. So the industry, as it grows for these win-win benefits, that's a limiting factor right now. That's why I think most farmers are really hopeful of this technology, happy to see it. Secondary, some benefits of canola. There's a hard pan issue in the Palouse and more no-till farming, things like that. Canola sends down a gigantic taproot and fractures the soil profile. Stops erosion, cleaner water coming off these fields. We don't have to use the deep tillage practices with canola that we try to fracture the ground up to make better moisture absorption. And then lastly, quickly, it's besides the carbon footprint, you guys have talked about advantages of it. The canola also uses far less fungicides or chemicals on our canola because it's such a rapid growing plant that we only apply a herbicide one time on our canola because it expands so big and shades the ground to where we don't have to do a second time. It chokes out the weed population. I guess basically, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, good. You mentioned pulses, legumes, peas, lentils, garbanzo beans.
Right.
So you would use canola essentially as substitute in that
Yes,
rotation.
yes, yeah. And we touch in 4 counties where we farm up there. There's kind of 4 counties right there. And it's a growth industry. It's not an old crop to where we're trying to resignate, a old crop to where this is a growth crop. And that's the limiting factors right now is the crushing capacity.
Okay, thanks. We're not going to give up our lentil festival, I'm just saying, right? Okay. Even though I said we grow more garbanzo beans here now than lentils, but that's okay. It's okay. You know, a lot in the community, we've seen a lot of media and concerns around the actual biodiesel operation, processing, emissions, odor, et cetera. Why is this operation different than what say we see up in Warden or other biodiesel processing plants? What's the difference? Is that Ernest or
I can start.
Richard? Okay.
First of all, Carrie brought some canola here, okay? And if you smell it, it smells wonderful. There have been some questions submitted that some types of canola have a kind of a rotten type of smell. The varietals that are being planted here in the Palouse do not.
Yeah.
And that's what we were just talking about that right before this meeting started. So that's one question we don't have to worry. So that's not a difference in how we're going to make the biodiesel. That's a difference starting right at the farm, okay? Now, the next step is how are we different than other biodiesel producers, is that we bring a very professional level of engineering to our plants. A lot of biodiesel plants in the United States were basically built as outgrowths of garage technology, and they were never built with professional level engineering. Ours will be built using engineering, design, build firms that have decades and decades of experience doing this type of processing. So we will apply that level of engineering expertise in order to minimize risks, maximize our ability to produce safely here in this area. Was there any other?
Yeah, I also want to mention the topic of smell has come up, and you know, I've seen a number of references to a particular biodiesel plant that's down in San Diego, and I want to point out that that's a very different type of operation. That is a biodiesel effort that is using recycled vegetable oil, which inherently has chemical residuals in it that are going to give off smells. So it's really an apples to oranges kind of comparison.
And then the last point on pollution, everybody's really concerned about the sound. You know, the only thing that really makes sound in our entire operation is going to be the crusher. And, you know, the farmers will tell you that, you know, you really don't hear it until you drive up on the location. But we're also going to be completely enclosed. Everything that we have on our campus idea is going to be enclosed into a series of buildings. So that's going to mitigate a lot of the sound and issues that you're commonly thinking about.
Okay, thank you. You've spoken a lot to sustainable net zero carbon footprint. So help me understand how this will be achieved and why that's important. Right?
So that, I mean, that's the whole concept of what we're trying to put together, is something that really uses all of our inputs and all of our outputs to create some kind of product or product recycling. And we're doing that with a heavy emphasis on solar power. So we're going to, and then one of the products we're going to take out, we're going to go put it into vehicles, diesel into tractors and vehicles that are being used for the farm production. So the net effect is a very significant carbon reduction without taking much other than solar.
Let me be more specific on some of those things. As I mentioned before, and we showed the graph, you know, the DOE website, many studies over decades now show that biodiesel produced from oil seeds like soybean and canola have a 75% carbon footprint reduction compared to petrodiesel. Well, those calculations assumed that the energy required to produce the biodiesel was coming from fossil sources. That calculation assumed that the glycerin that was produced as a byproduct of making the biodiesel wasn't going to be of very much use. So right off the bat here, we're going to be going 100% renewable by solar and biomass, okay? Number two, our biodiesel production byproduct, the glycerin, is going to be fermented into this next chemical, 1,3-propane-diol, that will actually lead to a further lowering of the carbon footprint. So if one was to do a life cycle analysis, that's what the university people call it, a life cycle analysis of the carbon footprint for this process that we're doing, even before we do the green methanol, we'll have a greater than 85% reduction in carbon footprint. When we close that last loop so that we're going to eliminate the emissions from our biomass boilers and eliminate the carbon footprint associated with bringing methanol into our plant, that's what's going to get us down towards net zero. Can we actually achieve truly net zero? I don't really know, but that's our entire goal here, is to get as close to that as possible.
Richard, while you have the mic, I want to follow up with that. This 1,3-propane-diol used, you explain what it's used for, but is it really safe in the form that you'll produce it in? Again, that's another concern. I mean, do we have a volatile chemical in the neighborhood?
Yes. So 1,3-propane-diol, chemical names in general always sound pretty threatening, right? So, what is 1,3-propane-diol? Okay, 1,3-propane-diol, when we produce it in a fermenter, it's going to be immersed in water the whole time, because that's how fermenters work, okay? It's going to be produced at very close to room temperature. Well, actually body temperature, 37 degrees Celsius, 98 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? Still, cool temperatures in water, so the production process doesn't have any issues as far as safety, okay? Now, the 1,3-propane-diol itself, the easiest way, you guys don't have to take my word for this, the easiest way to find out about the safety issues, you simply Google 1,3-propane-diol safety data sheet. Okay, and for most chemicals out there, you can get what are called the safety data sheets on them. You can get a safety data sheet for biodiesel. Turns out that biodiesel, it's clean enough, you can actually drink it. You don't drink a bottle of vegetable oil, right? But you use it in your cooking. Biodiesel is that level of safety. 1,3-propane-diol, not quite to the point where you can drink it, but it's a very, very safe chemical. Again, without going into the details, I just recommend that you simply look up any chemical name you want. Obviously, you have to spell it right, but you have to put in the chemical name and then safety data sheet, and you'll get PDF files that you can then read for yourselves.
Okay, thank you. I have some questions on why here, and I think many of you are here for that very question. Why here? I'm sorry, whether it was what? Oh, I have another question about that too. We'll talk a little bit more about odors generally. There's a lot of concern from all of you about the visual and aesthetic impacts on the neighborhood. So have you really considered what those impacts would be and how you might mitigate that?
Yes, actually, when we say we've engaged the community on the designs, we started with the farmers because we needed to know what we could provide technology-wise, what they could provide for a fuel stock, what would make it easier for them to be able to drop off. But we haven't gotten into the actual campus design. And that's why we're engaging with everyone now. That's what today's meeting is about, so we can engage, because we have had ideas of putting a complete berm, a natural barrier between the neighborhood and our campus site. We want to get your questions and your feedback a part of all of this, because we would like to design this with all of your inputs in mind so that we can make sure that you're comfortable with us building this site here in Pullman.
So I want to touch smell, because that's an important point. So the smell from biodiesel operations comes from what the biodiesel is being made from. Now, we are making biodiesel from virgin canola oil. There is not going to be a smell associated with that. The other components of the biodiesel process are methanol and base. None of the stuff that you put into it, other than the methanol, is volatile, which means that it won't go into the air. Now, for us, our economics are dependent on methanol use. So we don't want methanol escaping. So everything we're going to do and all the engineering around it is going to be to trap that and reuse it.
So any other comments on smell and noise while we're on that?
So noise, I think we touched a little bit earlier. You know, the only mechanical component of what we're doing is the seed crushing, and that's literally feeding seed in and it going through an auger. So there's really going to be very little noise associated with it as well, and the noise that will get generated is going to be contained inside a building.
Okay, thanks. Question near and dear to me is the dropping level of our aquifer. And again, I haven't seen a lot of information about water needs for this facility, but your operations sound pretty water intensive. So can you comment a little bit about your water needs and intensity?
Yeah,
Brian?
so at any given point in time, when we're fully scaled to what we plan to do, there will be about 200,000 gallons of water being used in this plant at any given time. Now, the way we've got our processes designed, 95% of that gets recycled, which means that our consumption is about 10,000 gallons a day. That's roughly equivalent to about 50 households, which is less than what would get built on this site if we were to develop it for residential.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So BK got there ahead of me. But the idea is that to make the 1,3-propane diol, we'll have fermenters. Fermenters are just big tanks, just like what people use to make booze, right? Beer and wine. Our fermenters will be slightly different. They'll be running continuously instead of in batches. And each fermenter will run about 30,000 gallons of water through it each day. And we'll have 6 of those. And then there will be water usage in the biodiesel. If we didn't recycle and reuse our water, we'd be talking about using, as Brian just said, 200,000 gallons of water a day. Totally unsustainable, okay? However, we're going to recycle and reuse that water 95%, so that if you take 200,000 gallons a day and you take 5% of that, we're going to actually need a water draw of about 10,000 gallons a day. And then there will be about 10,000 gallons a day of discharge also. And so the right question to ask isn't how much water you're going to use, but what's the water that you're going to discharge, right? With industrial processes, you're always concerned about water pollution. Well, the water that we discharge is going to satisfy all the requirements of the Pullman Sewer District in terms of pH, BOD, COD, and we have some people in the audience that know about wastewater treatment, and they can speak to this in more detail than I can right now. But we're aware of those requirements, and we can meet those. And we can meet those because the processes we're using are using essentially all benign chemicals at all relatively low operating temperatures and pressures. So our waste products are very benign. The biggest waste product problem in biodiesel is glycerin. There's a plant in New Haven, Connecticut that makes 40 million gallons a year of biodiesel, and they came this close to getting shut down last year because they were dumping glycerin into the sewer system. Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to convert our glycerin to 1,3-propane diol. That's then a saleable product. Okay, so that's part of the difference here. Okay, so I think our water usage, because of the recycle and reuse that we're going to be doing, is going to be well within the capacity of the city to work with us on. And as BK just mentioned, it's actually going to be less water usage than if that same property, that 184 acres, was fully developed for residential usage.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about emissions, noise. Let's talk about traffic, okay? What kind of truck traffic would you anticipate? Again, that's a concern. I know this property fronts 195, but still, you're right next to the community.
So during harvest season, which is going to be the primary time that we have trucks at any given day, we're looking at 20 trucks a day, tops.
Okay.
And we're going to actually have on-site ability for parking and for staging so that these trucks will never be in any road at any given time.
So follow up on that, is it anticipated that these trucks could necessarily fuel up with your product there?
Yes, actually, that's a part of our business model is that the farmers get to fuel with biodiesel on site, and we're also going to have a fuel truck to go out to the combines to be able to fuel on site for them as well.
Good, thank you. Let's go back to safety a little bit and explosions. I know we touched on it a little bit, but You know, there's media out there around biodiesel plants and some explosions. So can you assure the audience that we're not talking about this?
There is no operation ever that is 100% not going to have things happen. But what we are doing, we're doing a couple of things that are very safety oriented. One is this reuse of the glycerol. One of the leading reasons of fires at biodiesel plants is glycerol storage. We will not have glycerol storage. We're going to be using it to make a different product. The other area where you see fires in biodiesel plants is in their methanol handling. Methanol handling and transfer. We're using a novel reactor, not a novel, a different reactor design that actually minimizes our methanol usage and transfer. So relative to the sort of garage style technologies that Richard mentioned earlier, we're using higher end stuff that is safer. It's not without risk. There's risk with everything, but it's a lot less risky.
Right. If we were to tell you that the risk was zero, then you'd know we were lying. And we're interested in being 100% transparent with you. So Brian mentioned the reactor technology. It's a reactor technology I developed at the University of Connecticut a number of years ago. There's videos on it. But the key difference is that most biodiesel plants use what are called batch reactors. That means if you want to make 30,000 gallons of biodiesel today, you have to have a reactor that's 30,000 gallons in size, because it's just like cooking a turkey. You put everything into the oven for a while, and then you open it up and take it out when it's done. Our reactor is what's called a continuous reactor, which means it has continuous flow entering and leaving it, which means the reactor itself is much, much smaller. Okay? It operates at lower temperatures, et cetera, et cetera. I could go into details forever, right? I used to teach college, so, you know, you guys don't want to hear me. But, you know, it's a different technology. It's a more modern technology. It's fully automated. The key to safety in modern fuels processing is automation. So you take the human error out of it. You have plant operators that are still there. They're highly trained people, but you're not having people that are wiggling valves all the time, and that's where mistakes come. Okay, so our plant is going to be fully automated. Just truth in advertising, a number of years ago, I helped kill a biodiesel plant in Connecticut. I was called in as a witness, and they were doing it all wrong. It was a bunch of financiers from New York that were going to come in and run over a little town up by the airport near Hartford, put in a 50 million gallon a year plant, totally hid it from sight from the community. I came in, I just said, follow the methanol. The fire marshal was right there, and we had that conversation. We can do that with you folks also, but we're doing it now rather than 2 weeks before the planned groundbreaking, right? So by doing this now, I think it's a much healthier conversation.
So So 4 of the 5 people who are involved in this are in Pullman. They live here. I myself, I've been here 20 years. I don't have any interest in taking anything over, but looking at what seems to be a pretty viable business model. One of the people involved is a generational family. It's Garth Mader's been here. He couldn't be here today. He's out of town on business for a different thing, but we're from here.
So I have a couple more questions. A few weeks ago we had a fuel spill along 195 just north of here. So again, petroleum-based fuels are not pretty to clean up. So tell me how is this a safe fuel? I mean, you get a spill, you get a truck rolling out of here, a tanker full of this stuff?
That's a good question. Let me point out again, you can look up biodiesel safety data sheet, but let me give you an example. If you have a 6,000 gallon tanker truck going down the highway and a little Toyota swerves in front of it, and the truck goes out of control and hits a bridge abutment, the gasoline truck generally blows up, okay, and it may destroy the bridge. If it's a tanker truck full of petroleum diesel, because the flash point of diesel is much higher than gasoline, that tanker truck, when it hits the bridge and splits open, that may very well catch on fire. It probably won't explode, but it's a major hazmat site. With biodiesel, biodiesel is completely biodegradable. Okay, you have a tanker truck of biodiesel. The flash point of biodiesel is even higher than a petroleum diesel. That biodiesel probably won't even catch on fire. What you really have to do at that point is get out with push brooms and push it off the side of the road because it's kind of slippery. And the bacteria in the soil around the road are going to be really, really, really happy for the next couple of weeks. And that's the extent of the toxicity of biodiesel.
You talked a little bit about using this product in farm equipment to lower emissions. So I've had questions about warranty on equipment, combines, tractors. Can you respond to that a little bit?
So in our business plan, we're not just going to be giving fuel to the farmers and expecting them to run on their own. We're going to have a maintenance department that's going to work with them. So if there's any issues with the lubricity in the engines, any parts that might end up losing some of the moisture content in it, we're going to be right there alongside them to work with them and help them.
Okay, good. Thank you. Could you hang on, ma'am?
Well, you keep saying that, and I have
Well,
a question.
okay, but we're just trying to. Okay, we'll get. Okay, all right, that's fine. Okay.
Biodiesel is not a standalone fuel. It has to be mixed with diesel to be used. What is the percentage of the biodiesel to the diesel?
Right.
Okay.
Well, you're actually incorrect there. It's biodiesel. It's not like ethanol. Okay. In a diesel engine or in a heating oil.
The question was,
Biodiesel is not a standalone fuel.
It's not a
You
standalone fuel.
need
It needs
to
to be blended.
blend.
So,
Right. And what I was saying is that's not actually correct. Most engine manufacturers will.
Just asking the percentage.
And I'm getting to that. Most engine manufacturers will now warranty biodiesel up to what's called a B20 blend, 20% biodiesel, 80% petrodiesel. However, in my home heating oil system in Connecticut, I can put 100% biodiesel in there, no problem.
We're talking about tractors. We're talking
Right.
about
So several years ago, we took one of our reactors to France and we were making biodiesel there from soybean oil. And we were running farm tractors on 100% biodiesel, and people were super happy. They actually ran more smoothly than on the petrodiesel.
So what's the percentage?
Well, when you say percentage,
If you're going to blend.
We're not blending. That's what we're trying to tell you. Our fuel is B100 grade. So that's 100%.
Directly into their.
Yes, 100%.
Right.
Yes.
that's correct.
It's
And we've done that before.
Little skeptical, that's okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like, yeah, no, that's a great question. So again, I want to be respectful of time here. Here's what I can tell you. Again, log into this QR code. All of these folks,
How that works, because I just went there and I was able to sign.
There is an email and a newsletter at the bottom. You can send your emails.
I did that.
Okay.
And there's no link that lets me ask a question.
It says on the bottom of the newsletter, if you read at the bottom, it says, please email any concerns to agtechoscommunity@gmail.com. Well, it's probably in your promotions somewhere in there.
okay.
It could be in your spam folder.
This be built in a town where they need jobs and they need development, like many of the small ag communities around here, rather than in Pullman, where we need affordable housing and you're taking 100+ acres.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brian.
just to be very clear, we are not landowners. We are tenants. Would be.
Right. Okay. It's 1 o'clock straight up, and I know this was an informational meeting. I wish it was more of a forum where we could talk for the next 3 hours. However, what you can do is pose your questions to them. They're going to be around. Kerry, you have something to say?
Yeah. I quickly want to touch on one thing. I've been on the U.S. Striped Pea and Lentil Council for a year. What you brought up earlier, Western Pulse Association, Washington. The pulses are never going away from the Palouse. In fact, I'm just addressing what
Hang on
you
a
said
second,
here.
please.
The
Let's be
question, you might lose your Pulse Festival or Lentil Festival. That's not going to happen.
No.
Yeah. They're actually pulse is the first carbon neutral crop that could be grown in the Palouse. All right.
Oh, I like my lentil festival. Okay, so again, it's 1 o'clock.
I
want
would like
be
to address
respectful.
that, to
Ernest,
the
maybe
last
some
piece.
last words here.
The last piece, as far as addressing why not outside of Pullman, we did not propose this land site. We are literally just tenants. This was proposed. So that goes along with the purchase. You know, we were proposed this site from the Port of Whitman, and that's why we're engaging in the community right now. There hasn't been. Thank you.
Okay, great, yeah. And again, this conversation will continue for some time. There is a very robust public process, and I think that's where we all need to stay engaged. Again, use this login, post your questions to them. I know the port has an email as well. And I'll turn this back over to Marie.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. I just wanted to address the port question. They have suggested portcommunications@portwhitman.com is their email address or website if you want to contact them about the specific questions about the land purchase in general. A very good division there in those two things. I think that's really smart. I just want to thank you all for coming out, your passion, your willingness to listen and learn. I appreciate the panelists. I appreciate SEL giving us this wonderful location. We are recording today. Thank you, Dr. Schweitzer. Thank you. Appreciate that. He is extending the invitation to stick around if you want to continue to converse for another hour. I'm leaving, but have other things to do. I wanted to just say that Jeff has been recording today's conversation. The port will get that flash drive, and we're going to put it up on the Pullman Chamber's YouTube channel. So that link will be available at the port as well as the Pullman Chamber, so you can share that, listen to it again, have that information in front of you so that you can share it with your neighbors as well. Again, thank you so much for being so passionate about our community and what is important to you. Thank you.